Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sporting Max. But today we're joined by AFL legend and Hawthorn Hawks legend Campbell Brown. Welcome to the podcast, Campbell. It's an honour to have you on. How you going?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Max. Good to be on, buddy. Take it pretty easy. It's all going well. What about yourself?
Pretty good. Just get a couple of interviews a week in the lead up to Christmas.
Yeah, outstanding.
Now I'd like to start off with I know, and I've seen on your socials and things like that. You've been doing the Silver Lining bike ride. I mean, I understand that this is really close to your heart. What does this ride mean to you?
Yeah, I'm not much of a rider, but a couple of years ago, my mother passed away from ovarian cancer, and the Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation is the charity that I think about 5 or 6 years ago they started the Silver Lining ride. A couple of people got together and rode from Adelaide to Melbourne and then Sydney to Melbourne, and they got me to do it last year. It was a virtual ride because of COVID. We couldn't really go anywhere, so it was really good this year to hit the road as a group, and we flew up to Mildura and bike ride all the way back, stopping at country towns along the way. It took 10 days for the crew, and pretty sore backside, as you can imagine, sitting on a bike for 7-8 hours a day. But we raised a couple of $100,000 of much needed funds for ovarian cancer, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. So tough, but pretty rewarding.
So how many Ks do you reckon you ride a day?
It varied.
Yeah.
Usually, 100. There was a day from Swan Hill to Echuca that we did 163, and that was into a headwind, so it was pretty solid. There were a few shorter days as well, but yeah, it's pretty solid.
Can you tell me a bit about your childhood and what growing up was like for you?
Yeah, I grew up in Perth. My family born and raised over in Western Australia, and that's where I was born until I was 9 years of age. And then the old man, he got a job at Richmond. Richmond had been struggling financially for a few years, and he's a chartered accountant, so they got him over into their sort of commercial team to try and drive a little bit of money towards Richmond and get some sponsors and stuff. And the plan was to only live here in Melbourne for 2 years, 93 and 94, and then go back to West Australia and live. And I immediately fell in love with Melbourne. I love it. It's the sporting capital of the world. And so when the 2 or 3 years was up and Big Mel said, right, time to move back to Perth, none of us really wanted to go back, and we've been here ever since.
What was junior football like for you?
Yeah, it was good. I started playing. So when we moved to Melbourne, found a house in Hawthorn, which is quite ironic. I started to play football for Hawthorn Citizens, junior footy club, under 10s, played with them all the way through to about under 14s. And I was trying to combine school footy. I went to Scotch, so we had weekend football that was compulsory, had to play. And then also started trialling with the Oakley Chargers, sort of under 16s, and then through the under 18s. And that was sort of my junior footy, but I always wanted to play AFL. But I wasn't, a child prodigy that you hear about. Some kids were just destined to play AFL footy. I had to work pretty hard. I was always pretty slow and pretty short in terms of height. So, just had to work hard, and Hawthorn came along and gave me an opportunity in 2001.
So what was your greatest advantage compared to other players as a junior?
I could always win my own footy. I was a midfielder as a junior, and I quite enjoyed sort of the contested style of game.
Yeah.
So that was probably one of my strengths. But as people mature a little bit differently, sort of as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, I was quite skinny and a late maturer. And so all of a sudden, that was one of my advantages as a youngster, but it was gone once the bigger boys, I suppose, grew and matured. And for a few years there, I was struggling a bit, but obviously matured, body filled out a little bit. Did a fair bit of work on my speed and my decision making because I wasn't a great kick of the footy. But Hawthorn saw enough grunt, I suppose, to give me a chance.
So you mentioned before playing for the Oakley Chargers and trialling with them. What was that sort of whole process like?
Yeah, it's great. The Oakley Chargers were fantastic. I had a coach called John Lamont who went on to coach Werribee, and he's spent some time at North Melbourne. He was a fantastic coach for me at the time. He backed me in. I had a reasonably good carnival. Got picked for the state under 16 sort of squad, and they cut it from 50 to 40, and I made that. And they cut it from 40 to 30, and I made that. And then on the last night, we're at Princes Park, and there was 27 of us there. Only 25 got picked to play in the under 16 state carnival, and so I knew there was two guys that were going to get told the bad news on the night.
Yeah.
Training, trying not to catch the eye of the coach, and he called one of them over and gave him the news. I was like, okay, now there's only one person left to get cut, and then he called me over and cut me, and so that was pretty devastating at the time, and the feedback sort of was that I was too small and too slow, so I went away from that. Just didn't get angry or upset. I just thought it was a good learning experience. So I got a speed coach, a guy called Bowden Babicek, and I, after school every Tuesday for 2 years, I went down to Glenfrey Oval and I worked on my speed. And fast forward 2 years later, the under-18 Vic Metro sort of selection process, and the coach from the under-16 was a guy called David Dixon. He was now the coach of the under-18, so it was the same guy. But cut me 2 years earlier. And same thing, squad of 50, made that, down to 40, yep, down to 30, yep. And the last night, there was 3 players that were going to get cut. And this time we were training at Victoria Park at Collingwood, and he gave one person the bad news, gave another the bad news, and then he called me over again. I was walking to him thinking, this is deja vu.
Yeah.
Sort of twice in 2 years, I'm going to get cut on the last night. And he told me I was in the team. Not because I was better than him who he just cut, but he'd gone down to Hawthorn training one night, and he saw a guy rock up in his school uniform and sort of get changed and start doing some sprint work. And he turned to the guy and he said, who's that? What is he doing? And the guy said, that's Campbell Brown. He comes down here every Tuesday night and does sprint work and speed work because a coach cut him a few years ago and said he was too slow. And he didn't realise he was saying that to the guy that actually did it. So that's a pretty good lesson from a youngish age that, sometimes the harder you work, the luckier you get. And while it did improve my speed a little bit, it's more the perception that I'd gone away and I'd worked on my weaknesses, and that was enough for him to, have the faith in me to give me a crack.
So then how did you get, and what was that AFL draft process like for you?
Yeah, so I went on from that and had a pretty good carnival.
Yeah.
We played Vic Country, South Australia and West Australia. I played like a negating sort of defensive back flank, back pocket role on Ashley Sampi in game 1. Then on one of the Burgoynes in game 2, wasn't Shaun or Peter, but one of their cousins. And then in game 3, the final, I picked up Gary Ablett Jr., who was a 17-year-old, and he was playing for Vic Country, and did reasonably well on him. And from that, I suppose, I went from being a draft maybe. A lot of the recruiters were there over that carnival, and obviously Hawthorn and John Turnbull saw enough, and pretty much on the back of that, they decided they were going to pick me up. So, the 2001 draft was around the corner, and they used pick 32 to draft me to the Hawks, which was perfect considering I was living in Hawthorn at the time.
So what emotions were sort of running through your body when it was announced you got drafted to Hawthorn?
It was just one of great satisfaction. I all I ever wanted to do growing up was to play AFL footy. You know, I remember teachers would ask me year 4 or 5 as a 10, 11-year-old, say, you know, what do you want to be? And people in the class would say, I want to be a pilot, I want to be a policeman. Or, you know, I always used to say I want to be an AFL footballer. And you have that dream as a kid. You know, sometimes it doesn't become reality, but I was hell-bent on working hard and giving myself every chance. And if I didn't make it, well, I didn't make it, but at least I could sort of look back and go, well, you know, I gave it a crack. So when my name got read out, yeah, it was huge satisfaction. I realised that no point partying because that's just the start. You know, I've got my foot in the door. I've been given an opportunity. The hard work pretty much started the next day. And I wasn't overly keen to go interstate. Like, obviously I would have had an interstate club pick me up, but to be drafted to Hawthorn, who just come off the back of a preliminary final loss, I thought they were not far away from, you know, maybe some success. I knew a few people at the club, and it was a dream come true.
So then what was your AFL debut like?
Yeah, it was a funny one. I played in one of the pre-season games. I was a late call-up, and with about a minute to go, I sort of went up into a marking contest, and I threw my hand in to sort of give a cheeky rib punch to someone, and I broke my wrist. And so I had it plastered, and I missed about the first 3 or 4 weeks of the AFL season because I'd missed a bit of game time. They decided they were going to bring me back through, not Box Hill, but the Box Hill reserves, like the development. So that's pretty embarrassing. I was the only AFL listed player playing, you know, at 9 o'clock, kicking the dew off the grass before Box Hill. Right? So I played in that, got elevated to the Box Hill seniors for another 2 weeks. I was just finding my feet. And then I got 2 weeks suspension for charging David Teague. So that sort of set me back a little bit again. Yeah. And then I came back and they were discussing whether they'd bring me back through the Box Hill twos again. And they didn't, but I was a million miles off AFL level, or so you'd think. And then I played 2 pretty good games. Hawthorn had 2 pretty bad losses at the senior level, and completely out of the blue, Peter Schwab called me on a Thursday, which was my day off. I was driving home from Deakin Uni. I'd been studying, and I didn't even have Schwabby's number in my phone, right? So I answered the call, and he just said, Brownie, Peter Schwabby, congratulations, mate. You're making your debut this week against Adelaide. Wow. And it was a bit of a whirlwind because we flew there the next day, and the parents came over, and you know, that was great. But I wouldn't say I deserved my first game. Yeah. It was more a point of just getting a few kids in and giving them an opportunity. Sam Mitchell came in that game as well for another taste of footy. He debuted a little bit earlier. And from that day forth, I never played for Box Hill again. So I never got dropped. I held my spot, and away we went.
So how hard?
10 goals.
So how hard did you have to work to maintain and sort of cement your spot at the Hawks?
You got to work hard all the time. Like, I never truly felt safe. I always felt like I was only 1 or 2 bad weeks away from, getting dropped. So with that mindset, I never got complacent. I just wanted to improve. I wanted to become a better footballer. And I started to play as a forward, which was pretty foreign to me because I got drafted as a midfielder, and forward can be pretty difficult. You got to be outstanding at sort of reading the play and things like that. Then they threw me down back as a lockdown defender on a few guys, and I felt that probably suited my personality, my game style a bit better. I didn't necessarily need to get a heap of the footy. I just needed to beat my direct opponent, one-on-one, and try and tackle and chase and smother and do all those sort of 1%ers, which I enjoyed doing. So it took a little while to sort of establish a specific role within the team, but I was happy just coming off the bench and playing whatever role that Peter Schwab wanted me to.
Now, you received a Rising Star nomination in your debut season. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do. It was the last round of 2022. We went into that game against the Cats. The season was still alive. Like we were, I think we were 11 and 10, and had to beat the Cats by like 10 goals to make the finals. So we're having a crack. We played a pretty offensive game. And, I started up forward, and I got on the end of a few. I think I kicked 3 goals in the first half, and we ended up only winning by a couple of goals. So it was season over, but it was a pretty rewarding way to finish the first season with, a little bag of 3, and then a NAB Rising Star nomination. We were on Mad Monday at the time, so I didn't get too carried away.
Yeah. Now, I know you were in the international rules team in 2006. How did you find this experience?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Again, it was one of those things that you saw players go over to Ireland and play the Irish, and you sort of dream that one day you could hopefully be part of that. Kevin Sheedy was the coach at the time, and he decided he wanted to take a bit of a different side over there. And Michael Voss came on the trip, and it was Barry Hall was there, and Michael O'Loughlin and Fev and Dustin Fletcher. They're all legends of the game. I was still pretty young. I think I was only sort of like 23 or 24 years of age. So you're just in awe of those guys. And we went over and had a great experience. And played them in Galway, played them in Croke Park in front of sort of 90,000 fanatical Irish, and it was a great experience.
So what were those games like for you in a different sort of style of gameplay?
Challenging, yeah. The round ball, while it's easier to handle, it was really difficult to kick. And the Irish have grown up with a ball like that, so they do little pokes and prods, and like they were far superior from a skill perspective. The thing we probably had going for us, and probably one of the reasons why Kevin Sheedy picked the team he did, was we're pretty aggressive and physical, and the tackling side of it's pretty foreign to the Irish because they're not allowed to tackle in Gaelic football.
Yeah,
this is a hybrid, so we could tackle and try and sort of nullify their skill with a bit of brute force, and things got a little bit willing over there. In fact, I think it was Barry Hall that absolutely poleaxed his premiership teammate in Ty Kennelly. That sparked things off, and we beat the Irish, but they refused to play the following year because they didn't like the tactics we used.
Now in 2007, you were a Hawks centre half back. How did you earn that position? Like you mentioned before, moving down back for someone who's not the tallest guy in the team.
Yeah, it was a funny one. I'm only 5'10", so 177 centimetres, so pretty small. Probably the one thing that I did have going for me playing on those bigger guys was I had quite a good vertical leap.
Yeah.
And back then, some of the rules weren't in place that are today, like chopping of the arms, things like that. So that was my big go-to, obviously. But it just happened by chance. I think Clarko had me playing a sort of small defensive lockdown role, and we were playing Essendon early on in the season. Scotty Lucas had been on fire. He was leading the Coleman. And Clarko just sent me a text message during the week, and he said, "How would you like to play on Scotty Lucas this week?" And I sent a message back saying, "Mate, I think you got the wrong number. I assume you're going to message Trent Crode." And he goes, "No, I think you can play on him, and we'll see how you go." And we beat him. I played okay. I kept Scotty relatively quiet, and it evolved from that because the next week we were playing St Kilda, and then he said, "Okay, how would you like to play on Nick Rewalt?" then we played Fremantle Dockers, and it was Pavlich.
Yeah,
and it just evolved. And, there wasn't a week that I didn't semi-dread who my opponent was going to be, but it was such a great challenge playing on the best players in the competition. I had a lot of support around me with some of the other defenders, and you end up being named All-Australian, which was by far the best individual season that I'd ever had.
Now we've recently had Scotty Lucas on the podcast. What was it like to, play on him and try and lock him down? And then, like you mentioned, play on other Australian football legends like Nick Riewoldt and Matthew Pavlich.
Yeah, the thing that makes them great is how consistent they were over their careers, and you couldn't afford to switch off for 1 second on those guys. They were all unbelievably talented, all had sort of different strengths and weaknesses. I used to watch a lot of vision of the opposition and try and work out exactly how they got their footy, where they got it, where they led to, any little tricks they did behind play to sort of get some space or a break away from the defenders. So I tried to be on top of all that. Obviously, Scotty Lucas was very predominantly left-sided, so you always tried to force him to the side that he didn't want to go.
Yeah.
And just little things like that. But that's the great challenge that I enjoyed, because every single week it's a different challenge, and it's a guy that's got different strengths. But Scotty Lucas is a star.
So what was it like to be recognised as an All-Australian for the first time?
Yeah, it was great. I played footy to win and to play in finals and win flags. And at that stage of my career, we'd only played in one final series. That was 2007. And all I'd really had 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006 was disappointment at the end of the season. But from an individual perspective, it was a great achievement to be standing up there, recognised as one of the best 22 players for that season. Was great. I never even looked like getting All-Australian ever again. So I savoured the moment and just had a freakish year out of the book. Injury-wise, I remember I pretty much trained every session for the whole year.
Wow.
I never got any niggling injuries. Form was consistent. Game plan was really good. Clarko was backing me in on some of the key forwards, and it was a fun time to be playing.
Now I want to get into the 2008 Premiership team, beating Geelong by 26 points at the MCG. What was your Premiership experience like?
Yeah, it was awesome. Going in as massive underdogs against the Cats sort of took a bit of the pressure off, I reckon.
Yeah.
Really young side, and had the arrogance of youth. We didn't really expect to be playing off in a grand final or winning a flag so early in Clarko's tenure. We were confident that if we played well, we could beat the Cats. They'd been so dominant. They'd won 2007. They'd only dropped one game in 2008. But we always felt when we played and we matched up pretty well against them. And the thing that we felt was our biggest strength was we had guys that were quick, elusive forwards that could take a mark. And if you go back through sort of history, you'll see that Buddy and Ruffy and those guys, they never really got hold of the Cats. It was guys like Mark Williams, guys like Cyril Rioli, guys like Michael Osborne, those small, quick forwards. And, I remember just it was a cracking game of footy. The sun was out. It was hot. There was 100,000 there. We were kicking goals out of our arse pretty much because there was balls coming off the side of players' boots and hitting teammates, and I wheeled around from 55 and kicked a goal, which I still to this day don't know how I don't think I've ever kicked that far in my life. It's sailed straight over the goal umpire's hat. So there's a few things went our way. Geelong should have been in front by 5 goals at half time. They squandered some opportunities. And then, Stewie Jew lit the place up and we managed to hold on and win a flag that not many thought we could.
What were the post-game celebrations like?
Yeah, Maxie, they were great, mate. We went pretty hard. Some people say we probably went too hard for too long because 2009 we couldn't really back up our good work. So, there was a lot of fun. We ended up going to Hong Kong for a week and just good time to be alive.
Now, you were allegedly put up for trade in 2009. The club then stating this was untrue. What were the circumstances sort of like for you at that time?
Yeah, it was a really funny one because I I knew that after 2009 season, we're obviously very disappointed with our result, missing the finals. That you sort of felt that there was going to be some change. My name had never really come up in the 7 or 8 previous off seasons. I had a year to go on my contract, so from my perspective, I wasn't going anywhere, and we were desperate to get Shaun Burgoyne. He had a relationship already with Clarko, and by all reports, Hawthorn and Port Adelaide couldn't come to an agreement, couldn't come up with a deal over the first 4 or 5 days of the trade period. They were desperate to get Ryan Schoenmakers as a direct swap. Hawthorn knocked that on the head. Then they sort of threw up Jordan Lewis's name. Hawthorn knocked that on the head. And then when Port Adelaide threw my name up, apparently Hawthorn said, well, okay, we'd consider that. He's contracted, though, so he's not obliged to go anywhere. You make a couple of calls and see if you can persuade him. And so I got a call from Mark Williams. He was standing on top of Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and we had a bit of a chat. I decided that Port Adelaide, wasn't a footy club that I wanted to go and play at, and pretty much knocked it on the head. And from there, it was done. We ended up getting Shawnee anyway a little bit later on in the trade period, and I wasn't overly upset with it. It's a business, and you sort of try and do the best deal you can for the footy club. So from a personal perspective, there was no real issue.
So what was it like to play with someone for, I guess, a season or two with Shaun Burgoyne?
Yeah, Silk's a great man. One of the most humble blokes I've ever met, and what a player he was. Everyone forgets how tough he was because he's so good with ball in hand.
Yeah,
such a good user and decision maker. He was tough. He's the perfect big game player, and in fact, I think there's never been a better clutch player that's ever played the AFL. If ever you need a tackle, a smother, a stoppage, a goal, whatever it may be, in a defining moment of a game, you go back and Shaun Burgoyne's fingerprints were on it somewhere.
And now in September 2010, you'd made the decision that you would go to the Gold Coast Suns. How did that sort of come about?
I suppose probably the year earlier, getting put up for trade, you sort of realised that I was getting a little bit older. I was 27 years of age. I was pretty keen to try and get a 3-year deal at the Hawks and just sort of secure my future into the age of 30. And they were adamant that they only wanted to give me a 2-year deal. And the rules had changed a bit. I alluded to the chopping of the arm rules. They brought in the no rush behind rules. So for a defender like myself, there was a couple of little avenues that I used to do a bit taken away. My role within the club had changed a bit too, because I wasn't playing halfback on the best players anymore. I was sort of a fill-in type player. I'd play forward, I'd play back. I felt like I didn't really have a definitive role anymore. And while Hawthorn still wanted me, you got the Gold Coast there sort of offering a 3rd year vice captaincy. The money was, but for me, it was about, okay, how many years of football do you think you've got left? And I was sort of thinking for myself, 4 or 5. How many years do you think you'll have left if you stay at the Hawks? And my answer to that was only 2. And I would have been sort of tapped on the shoulder, thanks for your service, retired at 29, and that would have been the end of me. So it was a tough decision to leave a club like Hawthorn that I loved. They were in premiership mode as well. So when you make that decision, you had to realise that, geez, you might leave and they might go on and win a flag or 2 more. Can you live with that? I'd won a flag, and I felt like it was a pretty good time to go up to the Gold Coast.
So how did you find your time at the Gold Coast Suns?
It was difficult. I knew that it would be hard, but I probably underestimated just how hard it actually was. There was only 6 or 7 senior guys, Gary Ablett, Michael Riscatelli, Nathan Bock, Jared Brennan, Jared Harbrow, and myself. and 40 18-year-old kids, pretty much, that you had to take yourself and your mind back to when you were 18. You were just you were trying to learn about your diet, about training, about sleep, about game plan. And I would sometimes get a little bit frustrated because I'd come from Hawthorn, where I'd been around all these guys. We'd played so much footy together, and I had a level of competitiveness and expectation about how we go about it. But the young blokes weren't capable of able to do that at that time, and they're young and I was learning, and so we would lose by 100 points, and it was a pretty tough couple of years. But we started to get our mojo going for a little while there, and geez, we had some talent. Like, the talent in the place was unbelievable with O'Meara and Harley Bennell, Dave Swallow, Dion Prestia, Tom Lynch, Steve May, all those guys now at other clubs.
Yeah.
But they were all there and playing really good footy.
What do you think's happened there with Gold Coast now, where they've sort of let go guys like a Hugh Greenwood? That was a bit of a shock exit in this off season, and then guys like Stephen May exiting, and Tom Lynch and Dion Prestia.
The management up there's been terrible. I think good clubs don't make really bad decisions consistently, and that's why they're successful. They make the right decisions at trade table, drafting kids, re-signing players on certain amounts. They're all decisions that go into footy clubs and keeping the club together, keeping them successful. The Gold Coast just have made too many bad administration decisions. So Jack Hines is another that left and went to Brisbane playing career best footy. So, that's been one area that they've just never been able to get right. And the other clubs have sort of, been sitting there circling, waiting, and then just some of their better players. And I don't begrudge any of the players that left the Gold Coast Suns. It's one thing to sort of stay there and be loyal to the club, but they weren't holding up their end of the bargain, the Gold Coast Suns. And you've only got a lifespan as a footballer of 8 to 12 years maximum. You want to win premierships, you want to play in finals, you want to play at the MCG in front of 80,000 people. You weren't going to get that experience if you stayed at the Gold Coast. So a lot of those guys made the tough call to leave, and they've had success, on the back end, which makes their decision the right one, I think.
So how did your time in the league come to an end?
I got into an incident in LA. Stephen May and myself sort of it should never have happened. And we got back to the Gold Coast, and the club and I sort of mutually decided that we were going to part ways. And they sacked me. The wording was that we made a mutual decision, but I would have loved to have kept playing. And in terms of, I put my hand up and took responsibility. I apologised to Maisie. Maisie apologised to me. It was done in a pretty mature manner. I wasn't upset. I understand why the club made the decision they did, and I walked away, pretty content that I'd played 205 games and I'd sort of achieved everything I wanted to in the game. It's not the way that you want to finish, but sometimes life's not perfect, and you just got to learn from those experiences.
So how did you make the move, I guess, to the media side of the sport?
Yeah, I always loved media and, having an opinion. I'd done a fair bit of media throughout my footy career. I was more than happy to sort of put my hand up when those opportunities arose. And that was always the plan, to sort of transition into the media. It's a little bit harder when you finish the way I did, because all of a sudden you have a few people that didn't really want me to be doing it, but just put the head down. And I've been loving it. I'm just taking the opportunities as they come. It's been a lot of fun.
I believe you captained the Australian team at the Kabaddi World Cup in Ahmedabad in India. Can you tell us a bit about this?
Yeah, it was a funny experience, mate. sort of didn't really know what Kabaddi was. And I got a call completely out of the blue by a player manager called Bruce Cater. And he basically said, mate, how would you like to fly to India and represent your country in this sport called Kabaddi, which is a bit like British Bulldog, I suppose.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And I sort of ears pricked up and I sort of went, that's a bit different. I'm always happy to sort of do something fun. But we were literally like leaving like a week later, and it was spring, so I didn't want to miss the sort of Caulfield Cup and Caulfield Guineas, and I didn't really know anyone else that was going to be going. So I knocked it back, and then he rang me like 2 days later and basically said, how would you like to be the captain? And I thought, oh, beautiful. You know,
I'll take that.
I'm now the Australian captain. I'll definitely come, and I'll ring a few of my my mates and, you know, retired teammates, and if I can get a couple of them involved and on board, so I got someone to travel with, then I'll come. And Stevie Milne and Adam Schneider came, and it was an eye-opener. I mean, I've never been to India. Great part of the world, and I'd never played Kabaddi, so we were trying to learn the rules and everything on the run.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. Yeah.
Now you're currently working for SEN Track with recent podcast guest Cam Luke. What's it like to work at SEN and work with Cam Luke?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. Probably the two things that I love are football and horse racing, and just by pure chance. They're the two industries that I work in. So obviously I do the VFL and work for Channel 7 and stuff, doing some of their football. When the opportunity arose 18 months ago to start working on SEN Track, basically you sit there watching the races.
Yeah.
Which I do most of the time anyway when I'm at home. It was just awesome. And you know, we've built that station up a bit. We've got some followers now and some listeners, and it's like going into work and sitting there and just having 3 or 4 of your mates sitting around talking a bit of banter and rubbish, and backing a few winners, and it doesn't feel like work. It's awesome fun. Really enjoy it.
So what did you think of the Melbourne Cup this year?
It was unbelievable. Very Elegant's one of my favourite horses of all time. I love the horse, and I'm a little bit dirty on myself that I didn't back her on the day. I sort of fell into the trap that probably many did, thinking she was only a wet tracker. She could only run well on a soft or heavy deck. And I wasn't a huge fan of Incentivize in the first couple of runs, but when he blew him away in the Caulfield Cup, I just thought this horse is unbeatable. So I got him round the wrong way. I would have loved to have hindsight. I would have loved to have had something on Very Elegant, but I'd backed Incentivize, unfortunately, and lucky the owners own both of them. So they're good mates of mine, and we partied pretty hard with the cup that night.
I've heard from Felix von Hof, who was covering it from Sportsbet. He goes, there was a bit of different styles of partying going on that night.
Yeah, it was a huge celebration, as you can imagine. We all went back to a nightclub in the city, and that was fun. And then a few of us went back to a friend's apartment who I was drinking out of the cup at 3 a.m, giving us a rousing speech about how good Very Elegant was. So we were a bit dusty the next day, but I suppose they'll probably win it next year. But I was going to say it's only one time that you win the Melbourne Cup, but the way they're going, they might win it half a dozen times. They're pretty good owners.
What would be your best advice to anyone who wants to be a successful footballer or media person like yourself?
I think just work hard. Understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, and just do whatever you can, whenever you can, to improve. Not many people in this world get to where they want to be first time around. It takes a hell of a lot of rejection, knockbacks. Me getting knocked back from that under 16 Vic Metro side. coming back 2 years later, working on my speed. History's littered with people that just persisted, kept trying, and eventually, you need a little bit of luck in life as well. But eventually, if you just keep working hard and you stay the course, you get there. And I think self-motivation is the most important thing. If you're motivated by fame or money or Instagram likes or whatever it may be, it's not going to get you where you want to be. You've got to be self-motivated. When no one's around pushing you on, you've got to be happy to get out of bed at 6 in the morning, go for that run or that bike ride or whatever it is that you do, because you know that you need to work hard, not just for other people.
We've got a couple of yes/no questions now to do with sort of football and things like that. First one is Hawthorn going to make the top 8 next year, yes or no?
No chance.
No? Do you think Melbourne can back up their premiership experience, yes or no?
I do, yep.
Yep. And the last one, I'm going to have to say Gold Coast in the bottom 4.
Oh, I'll say no.
No? Why is that?
I just think they've got too much talent.
They've got a lot of young talent.
I mean, if Rao's fit and going, they're a much better side. Guys like Rankin, he would have learned a hell of a lot from his first couple of seasons. Lukosius, I'm a huge fan of Took Miller. Yeah. They've got the nucleus of being a pretty good side. They just have to start putting it together.
Thanks, Campbell, for coming on the podcast today and setting aside, sort of 50 minutes or so of your time to come on and have a chat. It's been an absolute honour.
No, Max, absolute pleasure, mate, and keep doing great things.
Thanks, Campbell.
Cheers.
Stay tuned, everyone, for some more Sporting Wax.